Good evening, guys. I trust that you can hear me well. It's uh, it's been very sad developments. Obviously, some of you probably well aware, but in the case of Laurie Vallow and Chad Daybell, obviously the two children, Tylee and Joshua, have been missing for a long time, since September last year, and quite a lot's developed in the past couple of days since yesterday. So I'll bring you up to speed on that. Chad Daybell did appear in court earlier today, and for anyone who hasn't seen that, I'll play that for you as well. It's about 25 minutes long. But I'll welcome you in first. Hi Firefly, thank you for being here. Hi Julie Johnson. Hi Interficution, I think that's right. Hi JD. Hi Star Angel. Hi Lisa Rayner. Hi Tanel88. Yeah, what a horror story. I mean, this case, I put a video out kind of when they first sort of went missing, and to be honest, it's been such a complex case that I haven't felt that I've had enough time to devote to it and do it justice, which is why I've kind of been focusing on other cases. But obviously, it's what's happened in the last couple of days. It's just terrible, absolutely tragic. I really hoped that these children were somewhere in some kind of cult or something like that, but obviously it's not turned out that way. Now, what we do know, they announced yesterday that they had found, or rather they were searching for human remains on Chad Daybell's property. They then announced that they had found two sets of, initially I think they said human remains, and then said they discovered two sets of human remains, and it's kind of developed since yesterday and today. And just a few hours ago, it appears that one of the children is for certain Joshua Vallow. Reason being is that Joshua's grandmother, Kay Woodcock, his biological grandmother, has gone on to social media and said as much. So, I mean, it's just horrifying, isn't it? Absolutely horrifying. I mean, that kid was only 8 years old, and just unreal. Now, obviously, bearing in mind they found two sets of remains. Looks just for Tylee, it doesn't look good, does it? At all, at all. So, for anyone who's not familiar with the case, I'll just give a very brief rundown or how things panned out the last couple of days. So, Chad Daybell is 51. A search warrant was issued yesterday on his residence in Idaho. It's the second time they've searched his property. This time they had the FBI evidence response team assisting. They did raid it back in January, and they did remove a load of items from the home, and they combed over the yard with metal detectors and rakes. This is the home where Chad's last wife, Tammy Daybell, mysteriously died in October. There are a trail of dead people to this story. Behind this couple, they just seem to have left a complete trail of destruction and of mysterious deaths. I think they're looking into 3 or 4 mysterious deaths now. It's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable story. They're both kind of doomsday cultists, end of the world and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of part of me was hoping that maybe they were put away in a cult somewhere, but it's not turned out to be that way. So Chad, yesterday, he was charged with at that time, he was charged with 1 count of destruction or concealment of evidence. He's now had 2 counts charged against him after 2 sets of human remains were found on his property in Salem, Idaho. Each charge carries up to 5 years in prison. They're still awaiting they were still awaiting the autopsy results, but as I say, Joshua's grandmother has come out and confirmed that one of the sets of remains is Joshua. Now today, Chad appeared in court in Fremont County Courthouse. He was booked on charges, as I said, of destruction, alteration, and concealment of evidence. I'll play that for you shortly. The prosecutor said that the children's remains found at the Salem property and the state found the conditions of one of these bodies to be particularly egregious. The prosecutor added Chad had a strong incentive to flee if he posted bail, but Chad's lawyer said publicity was no reason to raise his bond above $100,000. However, the judge decided to set bail at $1 million. You can't really blame him, can you? So for anyone who hasn't seen it, I'll play Chad's appearance in court earlier today. As I say, Tylee Ryan was 17. Joshua Vallow was just 8 years old. They were Laurie Vallow's children. They've been missing since September. Laurie, Chad's wife, has been in the past 4 months. She's been in jail. She's been charged with neglect and desertion to her kids. She was never helpful to authorities, never told them where they were. And it appears that Chad has obviously been hiding them out. So whether Laurie's told on him, I don't know. But I'll play Chad's court appearance for you. It's about 20 minutes long. So if you have seen it already, I do apologise. I haven't seen all of it, so I'll play that for you now, hopefully.
We're going to go on the record. Good morning here in Fremont County, Idaho. This is the case of CR 2220-755, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. This matter is being held at the Fremont County courtroom via Zoom remotely. Mr. Daybell, the defendant, appears with his counsel, Mr. Pryor, at the jail here in Fremont County. Mr. Wood appears remotely from his office. There is the clerk here, there's a court reporter, and there is some IT support that is also on the line. This is the date and time set for an initial appearance. The reason we're holding this hearing remotely via Zoom is due to a order that's been issued by the Supreme Court. In that order, it designates that whenever plausible, hearings are to be held remotely in order to effectuate safety of society and effectuate safety of all employees in the courtroom. In future proceedings, it will be an issue that's addressed case by case and hearing by hearing. That order is dated April 22nd, 2020, and has been issued by the Idaho Supreme Court. Mr. Daybell, do you read, speak, and understand the English language?
Yes.
Mr. Daybell, can you hear me okay today?
Yes.
Mr. Daybell, it appears that you have hired private counsel, Mr. John Pryor. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you'd like to retain him. Mr. Pryor, has there been a formal notice of appearance that has been entered?
Judge, I will get that filed within a short period of time.
All right, but Mr. Daybell, Mr. Pryor is your attorney for this hearing, is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. Daybell, have you seen a notification of rights form that was provided to your counsel prior to the hearing here today?
Yes.
Do you understand all of your legal rights?
Yes.
Mr. Daybell, in addition to the rights that were contained in that notification of rights form that was given to you, I'm going to advise you of additional rights under Idaho Criminal Rule 5. Number one, you have the right to be at the initial appearance or appear via Zoom remotely like you are today. You don't need to make any statements today. You have the right to know what charges are being brought against you. You have the right to bail. You have the right to counsel. And you have all of the other rights that have been presented to you in that notification of rights. Do you have any questions about your rights, Mr. Daybell? I didn't hear your answer.
No. He does not.
You understand your legal rights, is that correct?
I do.
All right. Mr. Daybell, did you receive a copy of the warrant of arrest as well as the criminal complaint that has been filed here in Fremont County in this case?
Yes.
Mr. Daybell, have you had a chance to review that criminal complaint as well as the arrest warrant with your counsel?
Yes.
Mr. Pryor, I can read the criminal complaint in its entirety, or I can summarize it for you. Which would you prefer?
Judge, we'll waive actually formal reading of the criminal complaint at this time, and I've discussed that matter with Mr. Daybell, and we're ready to proceed forward without either a summary or a formal reading at this point, Your Honor.
All right. The court is going to summarize briefly what the charges are, so that that's on the record, and then we'll address the other issues we need to address. Let me get one more thing out of the way, Mr. Pryor. Ultimately, the Supreme Court order has ordered these hearings be held remotely, but it's my understanding your client is willing to waive his right to be here in court in person. Is that correct?
It is, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Daybell, is that also correct?
Yes.
With regards to the criminal complaint, it was filed dated June 10th, 2020. There are 2 counts in the criminal complaint. The first count is destruction, alteration, or concealment of evidence, a felony, a violation of Idaho Code 182603. The maximum punishment for that charge is up to 5 years in the state penitentiary and or up to a $10,000 fine. The allegation is that the defendant, Chad Guy Daybell, on or between the 22nd day of September 2019 and the 9th day of June 2020 in the county of Fremont, state of Idaho, did willfully conceal and or aid and abet another to willfully conceal human remains, knowing that said human remains were about to be produced, used and or discovered as evidence in a felony proceeding, inquiry and or investigation authorized by law with the intent to prevent it from being so produced, used and or discovered. Count 2 is also the same charge, destruction, alteration, or concealment of evidence, a felony. It's punishable by up to 5 years in the state penitentiary and or up to a $10,000 fine. It alleges that the defendant, Chad Guy Daybell, on or between the 8th day of September 2019 and the 9th day of June 2020 in the county of Fremont, state of Idaho, did willfully destroy, alter, and or conceal human remains and or did aid and abet another to willfully destroy, alter, and or conceal human remains, knowing that said human remains were about to be produced, used, and or discovered as evidence in a felony proceeding. Inquiry and or investigation authorized by law with the intent to prevent it from being so produced, used, and or discovered. Mr. Daybell, do you understand the allegations on both counts that have been brought against you?
I do.
Mr. Daybell, do you also understand the maximum penalties on each of those counts?
Yes.
Mr. Daybell, do you understand that those maximum penalties could run consecutively, one after the other, or they could run concurrently. Do you understand that?
Yes.
All right. We've gone through the criminal complaint. We've gone through each count. I've advised the defendant of his right. We've gone through that form. Let's discuss the next hearing that's going to be set. Mr. Pryor and Mr. Wood, that next hearing would be a preliminary hearing or a probable cause hearing. The defendant has a right to have that within 14 days if he's incarcerated. It's my understanding that based upon previous conversations that there'll be a waiver of that speedy preliminary hearing. Is that correct, Mr. Pryor?
It is, Your Honor. I've had that discussion with Mr. Daybell. In addition, I've had that discussion with Fremont County prosecuting attorney, and at this point, we'll waive the time.
Mr. Wood, is that correct as far as the stipulation?
Yes, the state's fine with that, Your Honor.
Mr. Pryor, the court's going to grant that waiver and acknowledge that it's knowingly and voluntarily made, but I will need a written waiver of speedy preliminary hearing so that can be in the file for the record. Do you understand?
Yes, Your Honor. I'll do that. Thank you.
All right. With regards to a preliminary hearing, let's first talk about the logistics of that. Mr. Wood, how long do you foresee it taking to accomplish a preliminary hearing in the future?
No longer than a day.
Okay. 1 day. Mr. Pryor, do you concur with that?
Judge, I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage, but for practical purposes, I think a day would be appropriate.
All right. We'll set this for 1 day. Mr. Wood and Mr. Pryor, do you have a timeline that you'd like to look at as far as scheduling that today?
Judge, my preference would be within 4 to 6 weeks.
Mr. Wood?
That's fine. We do have a preliminary hearing on July 9th and 10th in the Lori Vallow case. And so if we are going to push it out that far, I'd ask that this prelim be at least the week of the July 16th.
Unfortunately, I'm going to be out of town the week of July 16th, and I won't be back for some time. So if we need to have it in July, it probably needs to be towards the beginning of July or into June. Otherwise, it's going to have to be the last week of July. Mr. Pryor, does that work with your schedule?
Judge, the latter part of June and the first week of July, the 1st and the 2nd of July would be ideal for me if that's available to the court and to Mr. Wood.
We can
Mr.
make
Wood?
that work.
All right, let's look at dates then. I'm looking at the calendar. The end of June, it looks like those Monday is the 29th, and then Tuesday is the 30th, and then Wednesday is July 1st, Thursday, July 2nd. Which of those days do both of you prefer?
I think the 2nd would be best for the state.
Mr. Pryor, does that work for you?
Judge, I believe the 2nd falls on a Friday, if I'm not mistaken. So I would like to see if we could do the 1st, and if necessary, we can have the 2nd available in the event this thing runs a little longer, Your Honor.
Okay, so the 2nd is a Thursday, Mr. Pryor, but I appreciate that you would like to have extra time if it does go over. So if we set it for the 1st, Mr. Wood, can we do that? And then if it spills over into the 2nd, we'll make sure that date's available.
That'd be fine.
Okay. We'll set that then July 1st and July 2nd for the preliminary hearing or the probable cause hearing. Lastly, the court has issued the arrest warrant. The court designated that it would address bond and or bail at the hearing set today. And so I'd like to hear argument from both parties regarding bail. So why don't I hear from the state first, and then I'll hear from the defense.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state is requesting that bail be set at $1 million. While we recognize that felony concealing of evidence only has a maximum sentence of 5 years per charge, I think the background and context of this case necessitates a higher bail. One of the primary reasons we are asking that bail be set in that amount is that the evidence that has been concealed in this case, it's not simply a document, drugs, a gun. These are human remains. And we can, although those remains have not yet been positively identified, we are aware that those remains are the remains of children, which we believe is an aggravating factor. We have asked that the probable cause affidavit be sealed, but I would ask the court to take note of paragraphs 39 and 40 and the manner of the concealment of one of those bodies, which the state finds to be particularly egregious, both an aggravating factor and bears on character, as Rule 40 as Rule 46 allows us to look at. Your Honor, we understand that the possible sentence on this case is not that long, but knowing what the subject matter is, we find it extremely serious. And we would also note that because of what has been found on Mr. Daybell's property, should he bail out, he has strong incentive to flee. Clearly, this is the beginning now of an investigation into the deaths of children who are found on his property, and so that provides a strong incentive to flee, and we would ask that the bail reflect that. Whatever the court sets as bail, we would ask that the conditions be set that should he bond out, that he be required to wear an ankle monitor, and that his movement be restricted to Madison and Fremont counties.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Mr. Pryor, I'll hear from you next.
And Judge, just for purposes of the record, my understanding is the court's allowing us to address this issue of bond, but that in no way limits us in the future to file a further motion for bond if that's necessary. And I believe that's the court's understanding and Mr. Wood's understanding as well, is it not, Judge?
Let me make that clear for the record. Because of the nature of timing and such, generally speaking, the court sets a bail based upon a probable cause affidavit, and then if a motion needs to be filed after, it can be filed. I did not set a bail because, frankly, it was timing. And so, correct, Mr. Pryor, I'm going to give you complete ability to file a renewed motion or a first motion to deal with bail. I guess de novo is how you could look at that. And so I'm going to set bail today. When you file your motion, the court will definitely give you a hearing for that, and we'll take it and make a decision based upon that.
Thank you, Your Honor. But in regards to argument, Your Honor, I would point out that the charges are, as Ms. Ward pointed out, carry a maximum of 5 years. Mr. Daybell is not charged with anything more serious. And quite honestly, for the prosecuting attorney to assume that in the future he may or may not do that, and that we should increase the bail with the idea that in the future there may be something else coming down the pipe is just clearly contrary to what the purpose of bail is. Bail is to assure that Mr. Daybell shows up to court. Bail is to assure that he's not a flight risk, and there's nothing, as far as I'm concerned, in his history that indicates that he's going to flee the jurisdiction. I would refer the court to the affidavit on number 26, and it talks about the last time that they saw the kids. If Mr. Wood's intention is to pursue further charges, my belief is that he would have pursued those. And quite honestly, at this point, the court needs to take consideration of what the current charges are and whether or not Mr. Daybell will show up to court. Mr. Daybell has taken the initiative to hire private counsel. He has shown up to the proceeding today. Obviously, he's in custody. But Judge, when the police showed up at his house last night, Mr. Daybell didn't flee. Mr. Daybell didn't abscond. Mr. Daybell didn't run. Mr. Daybell's intention was, through his counsel, to turn himself into the court if that was something that was going to happen and address these issues. He has every intention of addressing these issues. He has significant family in the community. He has kids that live here. He owns property here. And quite honestly, I disagree with Mr. Wood. Mr. Daybell has every intention of staying in the community and every motivation to stay in the community and address these charges. So at this point, Judge, I would ask the court to put the bail at an amount that's appropriate for a 5-year felony sentence. I understand that there's been a significant amount of publicity with this, but publicity is not a reason to raise the bail to an extraordinary amount. And I would suggest that Mr. Wood's suggestion that a $1 million bail is okay. It's not okay, Judge. A $1 million bail is not okay for a 5-year felony sentence. And if in the future Mr. Wood decides to pursue other charges, I'm sure we'll address this again. But at this point, Your Honor, I think it's important for the court to set a bail at an appropriate amount based on the 2 felony 5-year sentences. I would ask the court for $50,000 on each count for a total of $100,000, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor. The court has listened carefully to the argument of both parties. The court has reviewed Idaho Criminal Rule 46, specifically the factors contained in Idaho Criminal Rule 46 under subsection C. There are 10 different factors that the court has looked at. The court has also looked carefully at Idaho Code 192904 and the factors that are designed therein. In looking at the factors in 192904, there are 4 specifically that the legislators have set forth. Number 1, ensuring the appearance of the defendant. Number 2, ensuring the integrity of the court process, including the right of the defendant to bail as constitutionally provided. Ensuring the protection of victims and witnesses. And number 4, ensuring public safety. The court is cognizant that there is an absolute constitutional right to bail provided in both the Idaho Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. The court has taken all of those factors into account, and based upon those factors and the charge, the court is going to set bail in the amount of $1 million. The court notes that the charge is destruction, alteration, and concealment of evidence as pertained in the criminal complaint. I've taken all those factors into account. Specifically, the factor in Rule 46C, subsection 6, which designates I'm to take into account the nature of the current charge and any mitigating or aggravating factors that may bear on the likelihood of conviction and the possible penalty. The underlying charge here is destruction, alteration, and concealment of evidence, and the allegation is that the evidence was human remains of 2 different people. That's an aggravating factor, and the court has taken that into account. If bail is posted, Mr. Pryor, I'm also going to make conditions of bail. Those conditions will be as follows. Number 1, I'm going to order that a waiver of extradition be provided to the Fremont County Office of the Sheriff. The prosecutor must approve the waiver of extradition by his signature on the waiver of extradition. A copy of that waiver must be filed with the court. Number 2, I'm going to order that the defendant shall reside within the boundaries of Bonneville, Jefferson, Madison, and Fremont counties in the state of Idaho. The defendant shall not leave these counties for any reason. Number 3, the defendant shall provide the court with his current address and shall not change his address without notifying the court. Number 4, the defendant shall keep in regular contact with his attorney. Number 5, the defendant shall appear for all court appearances. Number 6, the defendant shall obey all laws of the state of Idaho and the United States of America. Number 7, the defendant will sign up for pretrial services and check in with pretrial services here in Fremont County on a weekly basis, as directed. The defendant shall have absolutely no contact with the victim's families and or any of the state's witnesses in this case. Contact shall include, but be not limited to, verbal contact, written contact, visual contact, text messaging contact, email or internet contact, and or telephonic contact. Such contact shall also include contact through third parties. Number 9, the defendant must wear an ankle monitor 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He must have the ankle monitor in place before he is released from the Fremont County Jail. Any violations of the geographical limitation imposed herein must be reported immediately to the Fremont County Sheriff's Office and the court. If the defendant is notified that under the order to wear the ankle monitor, intentionally leaving the area of restriction except for the purpose of obtaining emergency medical care, may be prosecuted as a crime of escape and subject the defendant to penalties under Idaho Code. If the defendant fails to comply with all of these terms, the court may, pursuant to Idaho Criminal Rule 46I and Idaho Code Section 2919, revoke the defendant's release and eligibility for posting of bail. Mr. Daybell, Mr. Pryor, do both of you understand what bail has been set at, as well as any conditions that must be met in order for that bail to be set?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes.
Mr. Wood, any questions?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
All right, we'll be in recess for today, pending that preliminary hearing. There will be a few things that need to be worked out, and we're going to go off the record for now, and I'll see everybody back here at the beginning of July. Council will have to communicate regularly, both with the court and with each other, about how this hearing is going to be held, whether it's going to be held remotely or whether it's going to be held in person. Mr. Wood or Mr. Pryor, do either of you wish to address that issue today?
Not today, Judge.
No, and I can, Mr. Pryor and I can visit and talk about that and see if we can come to an arrangement before we address that issue with the court.
All right, I will just state for the record that the court will need to make findings if we're going to do it live in person, and we'll address that at a future hearing on whether or not that's going to take place. With that, we'll be in recess. Thanks, everybody, for appearing.
Yeah, so that's it, guys. I mean, it's just absolutely outrageous, isn't it? These two poor little kids have been buried in his garden, and you know, him and his wife have just gone on about their life like nothing's happened. You know, I think they picked them up in Hawaii. You know, having a lovely time out in Hawaii, and these two poor kids are buried in the earth. It's just unbelievable. And the trail of other dead people surrounding them is just crazy. It really is. I've never known a case anything like this. Now I have got some pictures just of where they were or have been digging. So let me just. This was what was breaking earlier. This was the grandmother of JJ Vallow. His nickname was JJ. His name was Joshua. He was just 8 years old in May. His grandmother confirmed that one set of human remains found on Chad Daybell's property has been identified as JJ. So the fact that they found two sets of human remains, it's not really rocket science to know, is it, that the other remains are going to be Tylee. She was just 17, I believe. Laurie was the mother, different fathers. Chad's not the father of either of them, I don't believe. But as I say, that's probably why we've only got confirmation of one of the children. So sadly, I think it's only going to be a matter of time, isn't it, before it's confirmed that the other child is Tylee. So that was just a press release from earlier on. They were just basically saying or confirming that they had found two sets of human remains. Initially, they had only said that there was one, and they hadn't identified it at that time. That was early this morning. That's the property where they were doing the searching. I believe it was like a burn pit, and they dug a certain area. I have heard whispers before I came on that they've issued a no-fly zone over the house, presumably to stop the press and stuff from taking pictures. I'm not sure about that. I do have sort of one or two aerial shots, but I'm a bit reluctant to show them because I'm not sure whether you can actually see anything on those shots. We have got an aerial shot on our community page. I mean, if more people want to zoom in and try and see something, it's up to you. But you know, I hope that doesn't upset anyone. But I can't see anything distinctive on there. As I say, it's on our community page. I'm going to hold back from putting them on here, particularly now that I've heard that they've issued a no-fly zone. That's probably for the media and everything. But that was one. That's one image. That was where they were digging. I say that's just a further shot away. But you'll probably find other shots in some press releases. You may find some closer up photos. I'm just going to refrain from showing them on here for the moment. But yeah, how absolutely tragic after all this time they found them. I really was hoping that they might have them sort of kept away in a cult somewhere or something like that. Because you just don't know with these cults, do you? And the fact that the parents have gone on record that they've told people that Laurie didn't have any children, and they've told other people that Tylee and Joshua were possessed and zombies. I mean, it just shows you the kind of mentality of these people. There's some kind of doomsday cult that they were involved in. It's frightening, isn't it, when religion takes people that far that they become that mentally disturbed that they would do something like that. Somebody mentioned maybe the children witness to something that they didn't want them to see, and that's a very good possibility actually for a motive, because of course the killing of two children, it's got to be a serious motive there, right? And there's been no real mention of that yet, so that will be interesting to know. But as I say, there are a whole list of other suspicious deaths behind these two people. Chad Daybell's last wife, Tammy Daybell, she died in October. She actually died in that same property that where they're searching. They believe that she just died of natural circumstances in her sleep. And I don't think a proper autopsy was done because they just believed that it was natural causes. But she was exhumed. After everything obviously kind of broke about the missing children and they've done further investigations, they actually exhumed Tammy's body. I think it was in December, and they're treating that as suspicious. And that's just one of the people. Laurie's last husband, this is fifth husband. Chad is her fifth husband. Her previous husband, Charles Vallow, was shot dead by her brother, chap called Alex Cox. Apparently they got into an argument and Alex intervened and shot dead Charles. Then a few months later, Alex Cox died of a supposed heart problem, I think, but they're treating that as suspicious as well. It's hard to know what I've missed, but there's been another one. There's been another one as well. I think her previous husband to that, I think is it Joseph Ryan, Tylee's dad, has been treated as a suspicious death as well. It's just nuts. It really is. So they're now treating all these people that initially they thought were sort of natural causes. They're now treating them all as suspicious deaths, and absolutely, I mean, what's gone on here is just insane. It's a really hard case to try and keep up with, because just when you think you're kind of on top of it, there's something else. You find out something else. No, it's just unreal. So snow removers, in my opinion, I believe that they buried the bodies when Chad sent Tammy to visit her parents shortly before she died. How nice of him. Yeah, it's a possibility. Yeah, Tylee's dad was said to have died of a heart attack, but now they're investigating his death also. So that's 3 suspicious deaths surrounding these people. It's just unreal. And now we've got 2 dead children. And they just look so smug in court, don't they? It really drives me insane when they just sit there with a smug little look on their face. I mean, as I say, these people, since September when these children went missing, presumably, for all we know, they were buried around about that time, and they just went on about their life. I mean, they got married. So after, it was about, I think it was less than 3 weeks after Chad's wife died, that he married Laurie. Or it was less than a month. It was a matter of months or weeks. He married Laurie. And it wasn't long after Laurie had lost her last husband, who got shot by her brother. It's just a horrific story all around, really. It's difficult to comprehend everything that's happened. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else, sort of information that you might find interesting on the case. So they went missing on Tylee went missing back on September 8th, and Joshua went missing back on September 23rd. So they've been missing for all that time. Laurie called into Joshua's school and said that he was going to be homeschooled. You know, they just made up this whole lot of lies. And this was back in Idaho. And then they fled Idaho when the police sort of started getting onto them. I think it was the grandparents that sort of alerted police and wanted them to do a welfare check. And it all kicked off from there. I think that was in November, end of November last year. And since then, they've obviously been trying to find. And eventually, they caught up with them. Laurie was asked to produce her children, given a court deadline, and she didn't do that. So she was arrested. She's been arrested for about 4 months. She's been in prison. She was arrested on sort of desertion. I think it was desertion of her children. I can see if I can find her official charge. I haven't got it here, but yeah, it was desertion and neglect. I'm not sure what sentence she faces, but I don't know if you heard it, but in the court hearing there, he basically faces 5 years for each of those charges. So he's facing a maximum of 10 years. Yeah, so like Antoinette saying there, the egregious manner in which one of the set of remains was concealed. I did look up the word egregious, but it didn't seem to fit with the finding of a body. Does anybody know exactly what egregious means? I mean, if I look it up. Oh, okay, so it's outstandingly bad, shocking, and that makes it even worse, doesn't it? That wasn't what I found out the first time I looked it up. I know it was near a burn pit. There was you can see from the aerial photos. If you look on our community page, on our last post on there, we do have an aerial shot that was been released in the media. And there is a burn pit there. You can see tarpaulin sheets that they've pulled out. There's also an area where they've dug So, but that's just harrowing, isn't it? The fact that they found it in a egregious, which I've got to say is a new word for me, but it's defined as outstandingly bad and shocking. Now, of course, you have to bear in mind that these remains could have been there since September last year. So, and obviously near a burn pit, could they have been burnt? That's a possibility, isn't it? But it's just how awful for the parents and the grandparents to have to find this out now. How many times are we reporting on missing children that then, or children that then we find out they get murdered? It's just unbelievable. So that's kind of what has happened the last couple of days with the Chad and Laurie case. So I think he said that Chad's going to be appearing again in July. I'm not sure when Laurie, the mother, I'm not sure when she's next going to be appearing in court. And I don't know exactly whether, they've got desertion and neglect charges against her, whether that's going to progress into further charges. Obviously, we don't know. Obviously, they've got, a huge investigation going on. It spans multiple states as well. So it's going to probably take a little bit of time before everything starts becoming clear, to be perfectly honest. I'll just see if I've got anything else. So I just wanted to touch on Suzanne Morphew as well. They didn't really, it was only a press release that they were releasing today, which they've done. Doesn't really tell us much, but I'll fill you in on it. It wasn't a proper kind of press conference or anything like that. It was just a press release, which is what they've been doing from the start, really, isn't it? They've only been updating people via the sort of sheriff's office social media pages, really, with regards to the case. So today they have released the following. This is 10th of June. Today it's been 1 month since Suzanne Morphew was reported missing in Chaffey County. In that time, local, state and federal investigators have followed up on hundreds of tips and conducted a number of searches in an effort to locate Ms. Morphew, who was reported missing on Mother's Day, May the 10th, 2020. The Chaffey County Sheriff's Office is being assisted by the CBI and the FBI in this missing person case. In addition to countless interviews conducted in the last month, approximately 500 tips, that's gone right up, have been called into a designated tip line in the investigation, along with 10 large-scale searches performed throughout the county. On June 10th, investigators plan to conduct a community canvass, that would have been today then, in the county to contact residents and others to not only share information about Ms. Morphew's disappearance, but also focus on obtaining any new information in her case. Nearly 24 members of law enforcement will take part in this comprehensive effort on Wednesday. Public is asked to continue to report any information about this case by calling a tip line. The Chaffey County Sheriff's Office will release information related to the investigation as it becomes available. So really, it doesn't tell us anything that we didn't already know, and doesn't appear that they're really doing anything different to what they've already been doing. Oh, thank you, JD. Sorry, I nearly missed that one. Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, really, you would expect them to have all done all this already anyway, wouldn't you? Canvassing the local community and stuff like that, whether they've now got additional investigators and officers that they can put to work on that. Maybe that's what they're saying. But, yeah, nothing. Still no news. It's obviously extremely concerning. Obviously, the more time goes on, then obviously chances go down, unfortunately. But we can only live in hope. We don't know yet. There was, a creator. Some of you may have seen it. There was a YouTube creator that kind of did a sneaky, if you like, interview an unknown interview with Barry. I personally didn't like it. I didn't like the way it was done. If that's the kind of way that, if all sort of social media journalists and stuff like that sort of continued in that sort of reign of trying to get information, then it wouldn't work. No one's going to trust anyone if that's the way people do things. So I feel I couldn't really support that kind of action, really. I mean, it kind of, in a way, it appears that it was good for Barry in a way because, I think people saw that, he appeared to be genuinely distressed and, out searching for his wife. I don't remember Chris Watts out searching for Shanann, and I don't remember Scott Peterson out searching for Lacey Peterson. So, the fact that he's out there searching, leads you to hope that, he's genuine in what he's saying. So, but I just didn't agree with the way that the information was obtained. But I believe her bike was found, as we know, by a tree. It's just mystifying. It's very hard to put your head around exactly what happened, to be perfectly honest. There's still so many possibilities that float around in my mind that could have happened. But, I mean, there's no way that she would have voluntarily left. I don't believe that whatsoever. There's no way she would have left her daughters behind and not contacted them. So, yeah, we know nothing more on that at the moment, unfortunately. If we do hear anything, obviously we'll be the first to let you know. Just make sure, if you are subscribed to the channel, or mate, if you're not subscribed to the channel, why not? But just make sure you continually check out our community page because we often post stuff on there. If news comes in and we haven't got time for a live or put a video together, often I'll put information on our community page for you guys so you can see it as soon as we know about it, kind of stuff. So do have a look on there. But we'll just have to. What can we do? We've just got to wait and see. I'm still in contact with a member of Barry's family. I'll be speaking with her in the next few days. We're just going to have a catch up, but I don't believe that they know any more than we do at the moment, of course. So we'll just have to wait and see. Right, okay, I'm not going to drag on tonight. If anyone does want to come on, let me know. If you want to share your thoughts, just put your hand up in the chat and I can send you a link to come on. But that was pretty much all I wanted to go over tonight. It's not a particularly positive live, is it? I hate doing these ones when they actually find someone and they find them deceased, especially when it's children. It's not particularly pleasant whatsoever. So I guess we'll just have to wait in here to see if the other remains are indeed Tylee, which pretty much I think that's what everyone is just is waiting for. So just tragic, absolutely tragic and sick. I really don't understand what is wrong with some people. It's truly disturbing, isn't it? What some people can be capable of and just carry on about their life as if nothing happened. It's just shocking. So thank you to Kimberly, thank you to Firefly, and True Helper for looking after you guys. Thank you to Voices and JD for the super chat. If you're not a member, please consider becoming a member. You can have a look. You can click the join button and have a look if you want. You don't have to commit to anything, but it'd be much appreciated. And we'll speak to you again soon, guys. Hopefully, we'll have some positive news for once. We don't seem to have much of that, do we? But there you go. So take care, guys, and I'll speak to you all again soon. Have a great rest of your week.